Hello and welcome to a very special edition of the Daily Friend Show. This is the rebate debate. South Africa's municipalities have been in a state, not all the same, but something to think about. We're joined this evening by a wonderful array of guests, although they're popping in and out a little bit. I'm sure we're going to sort the technical difficulties. We have invited all the major political parties, and I suppose I'll start out by saying that the ANC and the EFF declined to accept our invitation. But we're very enthused to see representatives from the IFP, the DA, the Vryheidsfront Plus, and from the ACDP. We also have two community leaders that have used alternative channels to address community challenges. This debate really kicks off with a campaign launched by the Institute of Race Relations, calling for the rebate of municipal rates, property rates, to ordinary citizens because we're in a state of disaster. I think hardly any South Africans need to be told how serious our problems are just now. June 15th is coming up, which is the date to which the latest national state of disaster has been extended. That will make our country have been in a state of disaster for 450 days. It's a crisis. 1.3 million jobs have been lost, according to the official statistics. It is more and more difficult for ordinary businesses to make ends meet. It is more and more difficult for businesses, small and medium and even large, to keep afloat. That's why we're seeing these job losses. The IRR's proposal is not intended to be a silver bullet. It wouldn't solve all problems, but it would help, and help in a serious way. That's our position. The proposal is grounded in legislation passed by Parliament in 2004, which gave the discretion to municipalities to say to their members, you can have some of the money back that you've paid us in tax because you are affected by a state of disaster. The state of disaster does two things. It makes it harder for municipalities to provide the services that taxpayers are paying for. It also makes it harder for people to put bread on the table. So have some money back and keep yourselves afloat. Our position is that now is the time to implement the idea that was put in the legal framework over 15 years ago. We do understand serious concerns about the sovereignty of municipalities. The Auditor General shows that many are in a financially precarious position. And so turning over money back into the hands of citizens could, in theory, be a problem and make the municipal books go from bad to worse. However, we also see coming out of Treasury data that indicates that municipalities are not spending all of the money that they have. In June, as of June 30th, in 2020, Treasury said that the municipal budget to that point had been, over the previous year, 482 billion rand, but only 384 billion rand of that had been spent. So that's a shortfall of almost 100 billion that went unspent. Now, some of that comes from special grants, which come from central government and capital expenditure. And if that money doesn't get spent, it should just go back to national government. But CapEx, capital expenditure, forms a small minority at only 41 billion spent and 27 billion unspent. There's a problem there, but it's not the bulk of the unspent money. So we're seeing 100 billion unspent last year, and expect it to be much worse this year, based on indications coming from Treasury. That seems like a lot of money that is not doing the good work that needs to be done. And finally, we notice that property rates, which are the kinds of tax that we're talking about rebating here, amount to only 18 billion rand. So even if all of it was rebated, it would still come out to much less than the underspending from municipalities. But 18 billion rand put into the hands of ordinary South Africans might do a lot of good. So that's our proposal, is to rebate the rates during the state of disaster. And here we have our guests. And I'm just going to go through the guests one by one, make a brief introduction, and then ask, yay or nay, are you for this or against it, and why? Okay, I want to start with the Honorable Otto Kunene from the IFP. He is a member of the official opposition in the KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Legislature. He's an IFP caucus whip and serves on the Portfolio Committee for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. And cooperative governance is exactly the zone where municipalities and provincial legislatures and the national body come together. So thank you so much for joining us, Otto. What's your view on this proposal?
Thanks, Mr. Krause, for the introduction and the background that you have given. And we also thank the opportunity that is given to us to participate in this debate, and also great fellow panelists who are here in the debate, and citizens of our country who are following this debate. The IFP really seconds and supports the call that there must be rebates that are given to our people in the light of the disaster situation that is covering our country at the present moment. Section 15 of the Municipal Property Rates Act states how the municipalities can exempt property owners from the rates, paying rates. And South Africa has been in an official state of disaster since 15th March 2020, which can be roughly 450 days up to this point in time. The pandemic has had a serious impact on the lives of South Africans across the racial, social, and economic divide. Many people have lost their jobs and are unable to support their families. This is the time that all spheres of government should be stepping in to make it easy for the people of South Africa to get assistance that they so desperately need. The municipal rates rebates is one way to alleviate the pressure on property owners who have been affected by the pandemic. We therefore support the call and welcome the call that the RII has launched to rally South Africans to actually demand of government to allow the people of South Africa this kind of relief. The Disaster Management Act has recognized that we are living in a complicated times that we've never seen before. The Municipal Property Rates Act recognizes that when times are difficult, property owners can and should be offered some sort of financial breathing space. This is already legislated, and it would be a very welcome option for millions of South Africans who are property owners. This is not a far-fetched idea, because if the disaster had come in the form of another illness or act of God, these rebates would still be available. It will only ease the economic burden of citizens of our country by giving them much needed money, which may contribute to economic growth even at a small scale. We've seen the evidence that municipalities are not spending all their budgets, as you have said, Mr. Cross, as a result of the pandemic. This means that the financial costs that you are talking about can be sustained if rebates were to be given. So the IFP supports the payment of rebates. At least the reduction in payment that will be given will assist citizens of our country during this difficult time. We have seen how other governments in other parts of the world have been able to rally and offer support to their citizens, since we are unable now as a country to continue to give our people grants or offering some support and any other assistance that could be provided to them. It will be of great help if this is provided to our people so that they are able to make ends meet in this difficult moment. That is what I can say so far, and we'll come back, Mr. Krause, later. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. And yeah, just to say, through the IRR's campaign, we have already received thousands of submissions that have gone to municipal councillors and to Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma in her role as the Minister of Cooperative Government. And we would like to increase that pressure to make it happen. I'm now going to turn over to the Honourable Cilliers Brink. Cilliers Brink is the DA Shadow Minister of Cooperative Government and Traditional Affairs. He was a member of the Mayoral Committee in Tshwane for Cooperative and Shared Services between 2016 and 2019. He's a Member of Parliament. And in a previous life, full disclosure, he was also a business owner and a policy fellow of the IRR. Cilliers, same question to you. Yay or nay?
Thanks very much, Gabriel. I think it's important just to make one point, that yes, municipalities have not been spending or hadn't spent a lot of their money, both CapEx and OpEx, during the crucial months of the lockdown, that the first 3 months of the hard lockdown, I'd say April, May, June 2020. But the other side of the coin is that collection levels in those 3 months especially plummeted to the extent of billions. And even though the collection rate subsequently recovered, it doesn't mean that that past debt was paid back. It simply means that consumers started paying their current bills again. And so you see in cities that because of the hard lockdown, the ability to collect and your debtors book ballooned during that period of time. So it would be great to say you're now sitting with a surplus, which municipalities can afford to distribute in the form of a blanket rebate. But it's more tricky than that. What was made up on the swings was unfortunately lost on the roundabouts, and then some. So that today you sit with a liquidity crisis in local government that Ratings Africa estimates at 52 billion rand. That's what they say. Ratings Africa is the extent of the support that municipalities will require just to stay liquid, just to keep on paying the bills. So that having been said, it's a crucial debate that you have started, and all municipalities must answer this question: how do we lighten the burden on ratepayers due to the lockdown? And I think there are 3 crucial points to make. The first is all municipalities must take every possible measure to reduce their costs, starting with salaries. And we'll go into that a little bit later, but salaries are the main cost of municipalities. There are other expenses, but the crucial point is if you don't reduce the costs of municipalities, you can't reduce the increases on property rates and other tariffs. Point number 2 is you must grant ratepayers directly affected by the hard lockdown relief. So to give blanket relief is one thing, but the best way to help those that were directly affected is by measures aimed at those individuals. But then thirdly, whatever you do has to be properly costed. And you have to have a balanced and funded budget. It doesn't help dispersing a whole lot of money and then in the next financial year, a particular municipality is not able to pay its ongoing obligations or to spend on the maintenance and repairs of service infrastructure. So lockdown has left municipalities in a very deep ditch. And it's important to get out of that ditch and not deeper into the ditch. But that having been said, there are certainly things to do. You have suggested one possible mechanism. There are other mechanisms. So, for instance, there could be a write-off of interest. There can be a write-off of debt. There can be specific relief to categories of people most affected by the lockdown. And in many instances, municipalities have got affordability committees that considers individual write-offs. But the problem with a blanket rebate, as cited in the Disaster Management Act, is that the whole of the country is an area affected by a disaster. So the national state of disaster wasn't declared, as with the Knysna fires, in a particular part of a municipality. So you can say the people who live there deserve a rates rebate. The entire country is in a disaster area in terms of the Disaster Management Act. And that makes it very difficult to distinguish people who have suffered from the lockdown to those who haven't. And let me give you a category of folks who haven't. Here in Pretoria, where I live, civil servants who work for national government. They weren't affected at all in terms of income. Even members of parliament who are represented, including myself, we didn't get furloughed or pay cuts or these types of things. So to benefit those people under a blanket rates rebate would be unfair. It would be better to zoom in on the categories of people who were furloughed or lost their jobs or indigent. And that's, I think, a very important part of the relief that municipalities have to consider. But again, with that very important caveat, it doesn't help us destroying an institution by not thinking carefully about the financial effects of whatever we decide. And Gabriel, one last important point, it's the municipality that really did manage their finances well, that were able to give considerable relief to ratepayers. The others weren't.
Okay, very good. I'm going to take that as a sort of maybe. It's worth noting, as I mentioned about the thousands of people who have submitted applications through the Institute's campaign, that they are made directly to particular municipalities, calling for that municipality and not for the whole country to get this kind of relief, because that's what the law provides for. We're going to cut now to the Honorable Wayne Thring. He is the Deputy President of the ACDP. He's a former math and science high school teacher, former principal of Shepherd Christian Academy. He's been the former eThekwini councillor and member of Economic Development Committee from 2000 to 2019. He's a member of Parliament since 2013 and currently sits on the Public Works and Infrastructure PC, the Trade and Industry Competition PC, and most importantly, perhaps, of all of the committees in the country, the Ad Hoc Committee on the amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution, which I'd love to talk about, but that's not what we're here for. My question to you, Wayne, is the same as has been: yay or nay, and why?
Thank you, Gabriel, and good evening to our fellow panelists and also to those who have actually tuned in. I think that the ACDP's response to your question would be an in principle yes. Having said that, maybe let me also just premise the condition that South Africa and the municipalities in particular are in, financial situations and predicament that they are in. The ACDP also warned as early as April, May, towards the end of April, May last year, that a harsh lockdown is certainly going to impact severely on the economy. And South Africa has had one of the harshest lockdowns, and we've actually been bold to say that the effects of this harsh lockdown could actually be more onerous and more disastrous and in terms of lives and livelihoods than the coronavirus itself. And I think to a large extent we we've been vindicated by that particular statement. I think that we've actually seen, as indicated, that some 1.2 to 5 million jobs, some say even possibly up to 3 million jobs have been lost. Our debt to GDP is sitting at over 80%, expected to go to about 88% in terms of the finance minister, Tito Mboweni, is expected to go up to 88% debt to GDP. That is in the next 2 to 3 years. We are facing a fiscal crisis. And it's actually important that we look at targeting some of the interventions that can put South Africa back on the right path. Now, what are some of those interventions? I think one of the reasons why we said that the ACDP would agree with, in principle, with the rates rebate. Rates rebate, for some perhaps a write-off, and for others perhaps even a deferment. In eThekwini municipality, for example, you've had the principle of those, the indigent and the pensioners. And when I served there on the Economic and Development Committee, where they had a policy of rates deferment, where those who were actually found themselves in difficult times were able to at least defer their rates. So I think that it's not necessarily, like Honorable Brink indicated, it's not necessary, rates rebate across all municipalities, our 258 municipalities. But I think certainly we agree that the citizens out there, ratepayers, taxpayers out there, are in dire need of some reprieve. And so I think that the rates rebates is one of the tools that we could consider to ensure that they actually obtain that kind of reprieve. But I think that's clearly, most South Africans are also very aware that public enemy number one, and by his own admission, the president of South Africa indicated his own party is the number one accused in the dock, and that is corruption. Corruption is if one just looks at the corruption in terms of the Zondo Commission, in terms of Eskom, our SOEs, Eskom itself is in debt of some almost 500 billion rand due to corruption, let alone SAA, let alone Transnet, and all of the other SOEs. So if we are able to get a handle on corruption, and this is when we're coming up to the local government elections and even the elections that lie ahead of us, South Africans really need to take a long and hard look at where they currently are now, as opposed to a few years ago. And many of your, particularly within the ruling party, would say, we are where we are because of the pandemic. But many of us understand and know that even prior to the pandemic, already South Africa was downgraded to junk status. And the reason why we are there at junk status to a large extent is because of corruption. I think the second thing is cadre deployment. I love what the Deputy Director General Kaleni from National Treasury, responsible for local government, and she's responsible for the new accounting system that all local governments are supposed to actually put into effect, and they struggle. And she says they are struggling and they have missed their target dates because of a lack of ability. That simple practices that ought to be undertaken by those within handling the city's coffers or the municipal coffers, they are unable to implement some of these basic principles, accounting principles that government is actually, national government and treasury is setting in place. So as when we look at this, we see that some 500 million rand, for example, has been spent by your municipalities in terms of the Auditor General's report, the last financial year's Auditor General report. 500 million rand was spent on procuring services from outside, because those who had been hired to perform a particular function were either incapable or lazy or just didn't bother. And so here we have a challenge, I think, within our local municipalities, that your local municipalities we have to be pushing as well So dealing with corruption, dealing with cadre deployment, and thirdly, we have to be looking at a professionalized civil service. Our civil service, and in particular within our municipalities, and I think the DDG, the Treasury, indicated that in certain cases you have people who have been working within perhaps somebody who was a packer or somebody who was a cleaner, has been drafted into the administration purely because, not because of their competence. And there's nothing wrong with a packer or cleaner who has the ability being moved upwards. But in this particular case, in some municipalities, it's purely because of their political affiliation. It's purely because of a connection. And these are some of the problems that we have to get rid of. And so I think that the ACDP has been out front in terms of calling for a professionalized civil service. And unless we do this, we are going to continue to see our municipality failing in terms of service delivery, not being able to meet the needs of the people, not being able to meet the needs of the poor, the needs of the indigent within our municipalities. Potholes will continue to be in a state of unrepair. Municipalities will not be able to provide water and other services unless we fix these particular problems.
Okay, thank you very much. I feel like we got a zoom out there on some deeper problems, and maybe we can return to that in municipal service delivery. I'm going to turn now to the Honourable Wouter Wessels. He is a member of Parliament and whip in the National Assembly for the Vryheidsfront Plus. He is also the party's head of elections and spokesperson on finance. And he's previously served as a member of the Free State Provincial Legislature. Wouter, thank you so much for being with us again. Same question to you. Yay or nay, and why?
Thank you so much, and also good evening, and thank you for this important discussion at this time where municipalities are collapsing, where people are getting poorer, and not only with regards to the disaster. And I think Wayne was absolutely correct and spot on when he said it's much deeper and wider than only COVID-19 and only the disaster. And I think when we speak about this, it is a multiplicity of aspects. And firstly, yes, it's about the rebates and exemptions and reduction in terms of the Municipal Property Rates Act and in terms of this disaster. But secondly, it's looking at it at a wider perspective with regards to the fact that municipalities have failed long before the disaster. The majority of municipalities are unsustainable and have been unsustainable long before the lockdown or any or the disaster, state of disaster. So the fact, and thirdly then, the fact is that municipalities for very long has had the recipe of trying to solve their financial woes by increasing rates and taxes each year and creating unaffordable rates and taxes. And then it's about the economic principle, what we call a multiplier of output. And the fact of the matter is, if you increase taxes whilst there is an economic recession, whilst there is dire economic and financial circumstances, you're not going to increase the revenue of a municipality or of government. You're going to do the opposite. And that has been happening. That's exactly what has been happening, is that rates and taxes increase. You know, if you go and look at inflation since 2010, inflation is at 68%. Whilst if you go and look at rates and taxes, it increased since 2010 with 118%. That is the highest operational cost and the increase in operational cost since 2006, if you look at it through that from that perspective. And it has not solved the financial woes. It has done the exact opposite, especially if you go and look at rural economies where municipalities are, and so here referred to the collection rate and the bad debt and debt being written off. And it's because people are getting poorer and poorer, businesses are closing down, People are unemployed. The unemployment rate increases not only now in the disaster, but even before that. And people can't pay their municipal accounts. But now you increase it and you actually create more non-payers, people that can't afford it even more. And you actually create less revenue and a less of a revenue stream. So the economic principle is decrease rates and taxes so that there's more disposable income, so that there's more investment, so that there's more spending, and so that you then avoid a twin deficit, and that you actually then increase the financial, or you solve the financial position of government and of local government in this case. So I disagree with Saul here that it can't be a blanket approach. Yes, some people did not lose their income, but we should look wider than only the disaster. Fact is, we need more investment. We need more spending. So everybody should have a decrease and a rebate in rates and taxes, and also tariffs. We're not talking about that now. But if you look at that, we need that as well, so that you have more money in the economy, because the only way to solve the financial woes of municipalities and get municipalities working and sustainable is economic growth and employment creation. And we won't get that by not, at this stage, doing something different, and not only increasing all the time, trying to balance the books. We should be looking further. And yes, unfunded budget is bad and it's illegal. But maybe it's time that there should be unfunded budgets. Maybe it's now time, like you do if you have a business, to say, let's bite the bullet. We're not going to increase our prices. We're going to cut we're going to make a loss. But by doing that, we are then going to stimulate expenditure, and we're going to get into a better financial position. Lastly, it's about the fact that municipalities are not delivering services. So these rates and taxes are actually being paid, but there's no value for money. Tariffs are being paid, but there's no value for money. And that is an issue where property owners are saying, why should I pay if it is unreasonable, it's unaffordable, and it's undeserved, because I'm not receiving services? And that's the four aspects of this issue. And we should be doing things and start to do things differently to actually get municipalities working. We can't continue on this route of unaffordable rates and taxes and tariffs, and creating more non-payers whilst services are not delivered. Lastly, it's not really under expenditure by any municipality in South Africa, because yes, they don't spend the money, but they should have spent the money, because infrastructure is not maintained, services are not being delivered, so that money is not actually underspent. It should have been spent, and if it's spent, it should have been an expenditure at the end of the day. So we should also look at that aspect. But people deserve value for money. That's the bottom line. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a sort of a very strong yes, and again a broader look. I think that all of our panelists so far have done a very good job of not turning this into a simple sort of political exercise in bashing the ANC, which does command or run most municipalities in the country. And we're grateful for that, since they haven't arrived and can't defend their record. But to keep on the track of steering away from the political and thinking about alternative ways for South Africans to get their acts together, we have two non-political community leaders. And I think let's start with Petrus Claassen van Eerden. Again, full disclosure, I know Petrus in a personal capacity, but he is well known to many South Africans as one of the leaders of the Harry Smith Water Heroes movement, where private citizens were not getting water for weeks and months, and then decided to solve the problem themselves rather than rely on the municipality to do it for them. Petrus has been described in The Economist as a burly farmer and an inspirational leader who likes to work with all South Africans, doesn't matter how they look, as long as they want to put their shoulder to the wheel. So, Petrus, what do you think about this idea? Yay or nay? And what's the state of play here for our municipal service delivery? I think we have a small technical issue. There we go. We can hear you now, Petrus.
Sorry, Gabriel. I don't know enough about it to really have an opinion. I'm more of and we are more like a solution driven group, and me as a person. So you have a problem, we have a solution. So the problem was we don't have water, but so we solved that. Sadly, I feel like we failed because we've had riots here the last 2 weeks. When I came back from the farm this afternoon, there was burning next to the side of the road. There's police here on the highway. There's these, so it's not really, and I don't, the sad thing for me is that we were a community group that started out of crisis. Our community named us the Water Heroes. We were sadly, I think, instead of being not supported, but we were actually stonewalled by our local government, which is actually really sad for a community initiative that bridged a racial divide. It was, I mean, you could, if you come to Harrismith, it's such a friendly place. People wave at each other, and we had a clean town for almost a year. If you just drive down the street on my way to my office, it's about 4 or 5 blocks. There's piles of rubbish on the side of the road. I think another problem is that that was mentioned by Mr. Wayne and Mr. Wessels. Sorry, Mr. String. Is that the communication? Like we actually suggested economic, because we need work. So we suggested that we build a dam in our catchment area, and that the dam would be funded by irrigation farmers. It's actually a really big dam. It's about a third of the size of the Vol Dam. It will have enough water, annual runoff, that will be enough for about 30,000 hectares. There's actually 5 dams in a row that we suggested, but the problem is that there is such a the people that you communicate with, that you have to try and communicate with in the government, like at the water affairs, it's almost impossible to be able to get something done. So you have a problem and you have a solution, but to get those two together just seems an impossible task. And there's, sadly, they wrote there in the Economist that we were a really excited group of people, and I think the more, I've learned to know about what's actually going on, and the stonewalling that took place of the local government is actually very disheartening. And it's absolutely, I think, as Mr. Thring said, it's because of the corruption. So it's not about, the first meeting we had in our local town hall, the municipality was very reluctant to help us, and the fact that we didn't have water by that time, it was a crisis and a half, and they said that we should actually schedule another meeting. And that same attitude about scheduling another meeting and not solving a problem is the same that we've run across with, bringing this community project for building a dam. And actually, I said it, there's 5 dams in a row. It's actually even solve water crisis for the whole Val Dam catchment. I mean, if you consider the Val Dam, it's about 4.5 meters deep. So it's actually more of a evaporation pond. Once it starts raining, it fills up. So the catchment area is so much bigger than the size of the dam. So it's a really poor quality dam. I mean, the point is this solution will bring job opportunities to people, but you can't have this wonderful idea about job opportunities if you don't have basic services. I mean, they call it basic services because it's basic. It's like the foundation of a big building. You can't start building the building without the basic services. I mean, I don't think people really realize and know what it feels like not to have water. You cannot go to work. If you do go to work, you cannot leave your kids and your wife at home because there's no water. You can do nothing. It's actually, I explained it, I don't know who I explained it to, but if you really want to feel what it feels like, you must go to where your meter is, where you get your water, and you turn off that little tap there. And you leave it off for a week. And then you must also get water from your neighbor, because there's absolutely no water in town. I mean, so, yeah. So that's the crisis that we came out of. And the solution we have is a wonderful, viable solution for the whole of the community. I mean, it's job creation. There's water for everybody. I mean, it's just magnificent to get it input, to just even find. And the easy thing, is to just say no, because it seems like the people that are in the positions are not capable of really making these really decisions. So it's easy to say no. So that's where we are.
I'm going to cut in there, Petrus. I think that I think you make a good specific point about local level government not coming to the party and not just failing, but actually getting in the way of good ideas. And I think part of the connection between that case where private players are trying to recommend a solution to a problem by building a dam which is going to be commercially viable to them because they can use the off-run to irrigate farms, and because the town can then use that water to have a sustainable supply, and that gets stonewalled, is that we want government sometimes to actually step back and let South Africans work together to solve their problems. There are things that government has to do. As you say, basic services need to be supplied by government. Government plays a vital role. That's why we're so glad to have real politicians here who do the real work. But at the same time, there's a lot of work that private South Africans can do to solve problems when all they're hearing is, no, we'll make another meeting. And in that regard, I'm going to flip over to Dave Baxter. He is someone that we at the Institute have interviewed before, and we made a small sort of documentary about some of the work that he's doing as a community leader on the West Rand of Johannesburg. He's the chairman of the Panorama Residents Association in Walter Park, deputy chairman of the Honeydew Sector 2 Community Police Forum, and he served on that CPF Exco, and he's a volunteer CPF patroller. We went with him and saw how they cut grass and keep the parks clean and try and help keep the community feeling safe, and took a ton of asphalt to fill in potholes that the municipality wasn't filling in itself. Dave, what's your view? Should municipalities that aren't getting their act together put cash back in the hands of citizens so that they can do it a bit for themselves, or is this a pipe dream? Yay or nay, and why?
Gabriel, I think yes, I agree with the principle behind it. I just believe that will probably give municipalities an excuse not to deliver, even though they're already not delivering. It's just an added excuse to say, well, okay, it's because you guys aren't paying us. We gave you a rebate. On the local front, it is going to put more funds into the economy where there'll be VAT payable on it, etc., that will generate additional sort of smaller extent of money is going to the fiscus. I do agree with the previous, my eyes aren't that good even with my glasses on, the previous guest that You know, it's more difficult without water because we spent a good time without water than it is without electricity. Without electricity, you can make a plan. But while I agree with it, I also agree that certain people should pay and other people receive a rebate. I mean, we have many struggling citizens. A couple of houses from me, a lady could be losing her house because she just cannot afford it. So yes, I agree with the rebate, but is that not giving the municipality another excuse not to perform? Municipalities should be judged on a scorecard as you are in a job, where you have an appraisal, and according to your appraisal, you get an increase. Where municipalities, and it doesn't matter if you work or not, you're going to get an increase. Strangely enough, that road we did the live stream in is the only road that they actually haven't fixed properly. Whereas they had for a week long, they were in our area fixing potholes. That road specifically, they left out. Not sure if it was due to spite, but we will carry on fixing potholes. We will carry on cutting grass because we want our area to still have value. And that is the only way we can achieve it. So yes, I do agree with the rebate, but I think there have to be exceptions. There's got to be a certain criteria fulfilled to deserve a rebate. And on the other hand, it mustn't be used as an excuse by the municipalities. And a municipality should never have a budget not spent. Because then why budget for it in the first place? COVID was an excuse. I think half the municipality is still under lockdown. Because we're not getting the performance we're paying for. That's about all I've got to say. I'm not a politician. I don't want to be. We're apolitical. All we want is our area to be looked after. I don't care about it. We want value for our money.
I think South Africans around the country feel the same. People want value for their money. Okay, I think we've covered the sort of the headline topic, and we've laid the ground. I'd like to move into some detail. I think this is a stage where, please, if people feel like they want to jump in, feel welcome to do so. But I thought I could start with 2 points. One is debt and bad debt. I suppose I just want to flag the point that according to the Treasury report last year, municipalities were owed 191 billion rand. So that's money that's supposed to have been paid to the municipality but hasn't been paid. So this is part of the big worry. If you give some rebates, aren't you making that debt position worse? But if you look at what Treasury said, they said only 33 billion rand of that would count as commercially realistic to recollect. So 33 billion, maybe you can recollect it, but the rest of the 191 billion is more than 90 days in arrears. It's looking like it's tickets for that debt. And so part of the idea for a blanket rebate or for a targeted rebate around bad debt is that instead of municipalities wasting their time trying to chase after money that they're not going to get, they can just write off that debt and get on with the job. That's a sort of a background point that I wanted to make, but I wanted to bring in Mr. Kuneni, who started us off here, to tell us about the state of play in KZN's municipalities and whether we can, if we can expect better service delivery, better solutions-oriented work coming out of this crisis that the current country is nationally in. Otto, are you there? I think he's just frozen as I came to him. So we'll come back to that. Maybe let's flick back.
If I could, you asked for us to jump in.
Please do.
I think that if one looks at KwaZulu-Natal and you asked a question of KwaZulu-Natal municipalities, and I think certainly there's cause for concern. In the city of eThekwini, when I joined, it was in the year 2000. It was one of the best run municipalities. It was one of the municipalities that had, in terms of its debtors book, in terms of its cash reserves, one of the best, if not the best, from what we were told, in the country. However, that has quickly retrogressed where just about a month or two ago, it was indicated that the city of eThekwini had about just 26 or 27 days of cash reserves. A similar situation, in fact, worse situation out in the city of Pietermaritzburg, the capital city of KwaZulu-Natal, where that particular municipality has been under administration for so many years now, and seemingly unable to rectify the situation. The administrators who actually come in, from what we are told, are threatened. They have to have. There was a bomb that went off while council was actually having its meeting in the city of Pietermaritzburg. You have within the city illegal connections, both water as well as electricity, and council knows of it. We have our councillor that sits there, and he said to the mayor, "I can take you to the areas where there are the illegal water and electricity connections." And that is apparently costing the city of Pietermaritzburg in the region of about 20 million rand per month. Now, a part of the challenge, as I said, within the municipalities, and I suppose there are other municipalities as well that are failing, but a part of the challenge is a challenge. And sadly, the problem here is a political one. It's a political problem because it's a matter of power play. And we do not have this professional civil service who are servants of the communities, but rather they see themselves as landlords. We are the ones that are in power. We will make the rules, and you just simply have to obey. And I think that people within South Africa, citizens, need to start taking back their power. In terms of the constitution, and I think much like, and I just forget the name of the municipality, but there's a municipality where the residents took that municipality to court, and the residents are now running that municipality. And if that needs to happen, where the municipality is seen to be incompetent, where the municipality has, in terms of the Municipal Finance Management Act, Systems Act, Structures Act, they have an obligation, Supply Chain Management Act, they have an obligation to provide service delivery. And if they are failing in some of the basic aspects of service delivery, then they should vacate their positions and allow those, and whether that is citizens or not, but allow them to ensure that service delivery takes place. We say in the ACDP that people don't care what color service delivery comes in, whether it's green, blue, white, as long as they get good service delivery. And so we have to depoliticize this. And if we are able to depoliticize it and ensure that service delivery comes, then within KwaZulu-Natal and across the country, where the Auditor General has indicated that I think it is some 50%. We only had 20 audits, good audits, clean audits in the last financial year. 20 out of 258 municipalities. We have a serious problem. A serious, and you know, local government is the coal face. It's the coal face of service delivery. And if we do not fix local government, and if the citizens of South Africa do not see this also as an opportunity to take back their authority that they have, that the Constitution gives them, whether it's through the ballot or whether it's through the courts, but we have to look at taking back the authority that we have as South African citizens.
Yeah, very bold call, and I very much want to second that. Just a small anecdote about Pietermaritzburg landlords. I went to a region just north of Pietermaritzburg where land that had been bought by a government for the purpose of land reform, sections of that land was then being sold off illegally, and multi-story structures were being put up there. Very nice looking mansions. It wasn't poor people, and very fancy cars driving in. And based on the evidence that we gathered, it looked like there were municipal councillors and leaders who were basically auctioning the stuff off on Facebook to get, they were just treating it like their own, and it's not. It's really up to South Africans to stick up for themselves and claim the rights that are just a bit of paper if we leave it up to the Constitution. If we take the charge ourselves, then it becomes real. Siliet, I saw your hand was up.
Yes,
Please let me come
thanks,
to you.
Gabriel.
And then we'll go to vote.
To bring the point back to what can municipalities do to relieve the burden on ratepayers, I think it's important that municipalities be able to answer the crucial questions. If you are sitting with some kind of surplus, if you have unspent money at the end of a financial year, which I can tell you now, very, very few municipalities have that. And it's usually the ones that have looked after their finances. What are you doing with that money? Are you sitting on it, or are you using some sort of a targeted relief? To give you one example, an extraordinary example, in the city of Cape Town, no blanket rates rebate, but 4.1 billion rand has been given by the city in different forms of relief to residents, whether it be interests written off, whether it be incentives for people to come in, you pay a certain portion of your debt, we write off the rest of it, or a special assistance to churches, NGOs, vulnerable residents. So, you know, the disaster relief rebate isn't the only thing that you can use. You can use far more targeted measures, but the important point is you can only do it if the municipality has been well managed and there are certain reserves. So Cape Town is dipping into reserves that the municipality had built up over many years. And there is a reason why Ratings Africa says Cape Town is the only financially sustainable city in the country, and why they can withstand these things and still give relief. And it's because of years and years of good management. The other important point, so that's the first question the municipality has to answer. If you're sitting on money, what sort of assistance are you giving? Whether it be write-off, affordability, indigent assistance, and so forth. The second important question is, what are you doing to reduce your costs? Because it's all good and well to say, let's drop everything, let's drop the rates, but the municipality must first cut the expenses from the inside for it to sustain increases as close as possible to zero. So one way to do it in this financial year is to budget zilch, nothing for salary increases. Now, it's possible to do it in this year because we are in between collective bargains. So the 3-year collective bargain for the salaries and benefits of municipal employees have just ended, and a new set is to be negotiated. So one powerful way for municipalities to tell the bargaining council zero increase for municipal employees is to budget zero for it. And I think many municipalities have done that. They've insisted no increases. And in the instance of Cape Town and Tshwane and a few others, they've also petitioned the bargaining council to say there is just no way that we can afford salary increases. But we've got to go further than that. There are way too many clerks working in municipalities, people who push paper, who do things that can be done by computers. And we've got to start the debate about rationalization of employees. It's a debate that we're not used to in this country because there's never been retrenchments in local government. But in certain places, it's going to start to become inevitable. But that means the municipalities have to be prepared. One, they have to be prepared to systemize. So they have to invest in processes that can take over from the work that clerks are currently doing or pretending to do. And secondly, they've got to be prepared for the fight with SAMWU, because SAMWU has got the ability to destroy the service delivery capacity of any particular municipality if that municipality is not ready. We have got extremely violent and politically powerful public service unions in this country, including in municipalities. And so it is crucially important that we municipalities start answering this question: what are you going to do if economic growth doesn't happen, if revenue collection continues to deteriorate? And the number one expense of municipalities is salaries and benefits.
Yeah,
so I think those are important things. So if your disaster rebate if a municipality tells you, sorry, we can't do the disaster rebate, at least those two questions are crucially important for them to answer.
Very good. I think it is difficult for South Africans to contemplate both wage freezes and the cutting of redundant staff because of exactly the factors that you described. But at some stage, the bus is not just full, it's overfull, and it's not moving for that reason. And it needs to move. I see that Otto has rejoined us and then unfortunately just dropped out. It might be very well that he is failing to get the basic service of electricity. Otto, I see that you've just popped back in. I had been asking you a direct question, but before we get to that, we moved the conversation on a little bit. We will come back to you, but I had said that that Voter can go after Salir. So I'm going to turn to Voter now, and then we'll come straight after that to Otto. Okay.
Thank you very much. No, I agree with Sawyer. And, if you look at one example, last year in the midst of this dire financial crisis, economic crisis, lockdown, and so forth, Steve Tshwete, local municipality in Mpumalanga, budgeted for a salary increase for the municipal manager of 48%, a 48% salary increase for one person. If you also, in general, look at last year's budget of municipalities, the average salary increase of municipal officials was 6.5%. Now, that doesn't sound a lot, but if you actually go and look at the budgets, then there was a decrease in headcount. So less municipal officials actually delivering less services then also, but there's an increase of 6.5%, which then in average terms increases a lot of these salaries and a lot of the administrative staff and political staff's salaries, which was completely unnecessary. To make another point, Gabriel, I'm of opinion that municipalities are constitutionally obligated to, at this stage, give rebates. And if you go and look at the Constitution, one section is section 152 that provides that, firstly, municipalities should ensure that there's sustainable service delivery. They fail to do that. But secondly, it also provides that municipalities should promote social and economic development. Now, they are not doing that by increasing rates and taxes, whilst they have wrong priorities, they increase salaries, and they're not delivering services. And then also, if you look at section 229 of the Constitution, that provides that a municipality may not impose rates and taxes which are materially unsustainable and prejudice to economic activities. Now, currently, most budgets that are currently being passed and have been passed by municipal councils are in contravention of this in this time, and because of the economic recession. And that is, I think, the crux. I do agree that there's other avenues also, and one avenue that goes beyond the disaster is the creation of a property ombuds or a property rates ombudsman. Just like NAVSA approves the electricity increases, there should be an ombudsman that goes and where municipalities should apply for their increases in rates and taxes, and where there should be then an answer with regards to, is this really viable, is this sustainable, and is this fair? And then my electricity is also off, and we're not getting basic services. And then, so here also makes an important point, and that's not only on local government level, but also in terms of the whole disaster in the country. One of the reasons why we are so deep in trouble is because we've, for years and years, spent all the money. Government debt has increased. Municipalities, debt also, creditors increase, but there's no reserves. There's no contingency reserves for these type of crises. And we're spending all the money all the time. But at this stage, we now should look at what will, firstly, increase economic growth, what will be conducive for economic growth and job creation, and that will be lesser taxes, lesser restrictions, and get the economy going. That's the most important part. But we need new local government, and I know the ANC is not here, but I think we shouldn't beat around the bush. The ANC's biggest failure is local government. They've destroyed municipalities, and the only way that we'll get sustainable service delivery and basic service delivery is getting rid of the ANC at local government and from government in totality. Thanks.
That is clear and
Gabriel,
unambiguous.
can I come in here, Gabriel?
I really do want to. I want to turn to Otto because
Okay.
It's been his turn.
All right.
Otto, you seem to be in the dark. I'm assuming that you've got some load shedding issues. To cover some of the space that you missed, I was asking about the state of play in KZN and whether things can improve, and we started talking beyond the rebate issue about whether spending needs to be held back. In particular, wages need to be frozen, whether that's possible or the unions are going to make it impossible, whether an ombud or some kind of process needs to be put in place in terms of a formal structure to keep municipalities honest, or whether it's really just going to be up to voters to boot out the corrupt and bring in fresh blood.
Yes, thank you very much, Gabriel. I don't know whether I'm audible, but I'm really in the dark, as you can see.
We can hear you at least very clearly.
No, I'm really underscoring the point of the poor state of local government in the whole country, particularly in the province of KwaZulu-Natal as well. There are a lot of problems that are facing local government in KwaZulu-Natal. Like Mr. Wessels has said, the ruling party has done a lot of damage through its cadre deployment policies that it implements in all spheres of government, the unsatisfactory service delivery that's seen all over the province, the poor maintenance of infrastructure, and corruption that is endemic. And you see a lot of service delivery protests where our people are demanding better services because they cannot get the services that they deserve from the municipalities they reside in. Some municipalities, there's a lot of infighting among members of the ruling party. There's a lot of instability. And as we all know, the local government sphere is a sphere that is very important because it is closest to the people. But it is this sphere that is actually crippling development of our country, where services are not rendered, cities are dilapidating, and you find that a turnaround is required. Clearly, it is incumbent upon voters of our country to use their vote wisely now that you are heading for local government elections, which we hope to have in October, but if it's not held, but soon thereafter, where the people of KwaZulu-Natal and people in the whole of the country at local municipal level would be able to speak through their votes. The issues of salaries is a serious problem, very serious problems. I even heard that the Salka's CEO is earning 5 million rand. You just wonder if municipalities are so poor in delivering services. The organized local government structure, the CEO can earn so much money per annum. So it's a matter of misuse of resources where value for money is not seen, but a lot of money goes down the drain. Infrastructure is not maintained, and a lot of municipalities are not budgeting for maintenance, where they need to set aside money so that the infrastructure that has been put can be maintained so that it continues to render the services. As you can see with the ESCOM debacle that you are facing, it's because of poor planning and a failure to set aside money so that you are able to service the infrastructure that renders the services, let alone corruption, which has robbed our people of all the resources that they need, and the rich have actually benefited from the poor. So it's not a pleasing state of affairs when you look at the whole scenario of local government in our country. And you've heard that even SAMU now is threatening to go on strike because they are demanding a higher rate of increase for this year, even during the pandemic period that the country is facing. So it is really up to the voters of our country to actually extricate us from these clutches of the ruling party that we are facing in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Wayne, you had your hand up. Please go ahead. You're going to have to
be unmute. Yeah. All right. One of the things that two things perhaps that I wanted to comment on. One was the salary earnings of some of our officials. Again, when I was in local government level, I challenged some of our officials, and I said that it's untenable that even at that stage, our city manager, it was Mike Sutcliffe at the time, was earning more than the president of South Africa. It's untenable. Should not be. We were a city of about what, 3 million people, and you have a president looking after and overseeing the country of some, at that particular time, possibly was about 50 million, and yet you have a city manager earning more than the president. Now, some of your city officials do earn more than the president of South Africa. You have SALGA affording city officials in particular huge salary increases. And as early back as in the early 2000s, we called for a salary cap on city officials. It cannot be that we have certain officials earning more than the president of the country. When I challenged one of the officials, he essentially said to me, he said, Councillor Thring, I will Councillor then, he said, don't go there. He says, I don't want to entertain this discussion, don't go there. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we interrogate what is it that our city managers and our CEOs or CFOs are actually earning? And if their salaries are considered to be exorbitant, let's look at placing a cap on those salaries. I think the second point is with regards to Economics 101 speaks to your counter-cyclical methodology that you employ, that in times of surplus, which is one of the things that Trevor Manuel did, and he was accounted to be one of the better finance ministers, that in times of surplus, you actually put aside cash because the good times are not going to be there in perpetuity. And he was really challenged, particularly by the unions, who said to him, "Spend, more increases for civil servants. You're sitting on all of this surplus cash." But he understood that there was a time coming where South Africa was going to need to dip into those reserves. And so I think many municipalities, and I think Saliers was correct, Honorable Saliers was correct, many municipalities failed to actually plan for the difficult times ahead. Now, let me make my final point, however. In the city of Cape Town, the city of Cape Town has some 18 billion surplus, and they've planned well. And I think admittedly, they've planned, they have this particular surplus. But one of the challenges, if you look at 70% of the comments that came in during that 30-day period where individuals were commenting on the budget, 70% of the comments were about the huge increases in terms of rates and your sewer, water, electricity. Many of those particular increases way above inflation. And many of our citizens across, including Cape Town, many of them have come across some difficult times, and certain. This is one of the reasons why I said, in principle, we agree, because we did not support the above inflation, particularly within a disaster management period in the city of Cape Town and across the country. We did not support the exorbitant increases above inflation. Sometimes twice the inflation is sitting at about 4%, but we have municipalities increasing their tax and rates by as much as 6 to 8 to 10%. That cannot be in a situation. The counter-cyclical approach has to apply, particularly where there is that particular surplus.
I hear you. So yeah, the thought is you've got to put some caps on spending, but also put some caps on raking in money from citizens that are struggling a bit right now. Beatrice, you and Dave, I see, have been drinking Witblitz. I assume you just took down a bottle. You had your hand up as well, though, so you can tell us. I don't know what's in there.
Yes.
Oh, okay. It says water, so that's what it must be. We can hear you.
Okay. I'm just listening to the conversations, and it just feels like I'm like really on the. I guess I can call it my uncle passed away in COVID, but he used to talk about the coal face. So it's like at the face of the coal mine, I guess. But you come to our local municipality, so you can go speak to somebody. There's nobody here in our building. I think there's 3 ladies that work there. They can't help you with anything. We can vote. I don't know how we're going to change this. I don't know. It just seems like I'm listening to the conversations, and we should do something. We did something. We're nowhere. We didn't manage to get anything done. Derek Watts was at our municipality is in Kwakwa. And he said that how quiet it was. There's nobody there. So I think our spending on salaries is equal to the amount of money that actually comes in. So there's hardly any money left over. One thing I can answer for Uncle Dave Baxter is that I think there's also a big disconnect between what infrastructure is needed and what infrastructure is being done. I don't know how. It's just very sad. If you're on the ground, it's very painful. The more you know what's going on, the more you realize this is bad. So anyway, that's it, Gabriel. Thanks.
It's tough times, and it's for serious. Dave, you also had your hand up.
Having had a banking background, basically the bad management of the municipalities is to blame for this ballooning debt. Because in banking, if you didn't sort of nip the debt in the bud, where it was still affordable for the person to pay it back, and you allowed it to balloon over months or years, it becomes unaffordable and impossible to recover. So you got to nip it in the bud, which I believe that was not done. Otherwise, it would not be sitting at these billions. Now, being a businessman, it's no use increasing prices. And I found many of my competitors have done that to try and recover what they lost during the lockdown, etc. What you do is you reduce your operating costs. You work more effectively and efficiently. You improve your productivity. Your staff have to be motivated to achieve something and duly rewarded, and not not only financially, just praise. And I believe there's a big disconnect in municipalities where people some work and some don't work and all get paid, which is not on. We had a JMPD superintendent, may rest in peace. He was available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He passed away, I presume, from stress, but he would always assist you. The other one, you cannot get hold of. We have reported illegal water and electricity connections. Nothing gets done. So I don't think a real interest or the municipal worker or the, I'm talking general, are really interested. They're just there to do their basic job. Oh, well, okay, it's got a bloody illegal connection. Who cares? I'm still going to get my salary. If their salary was a commission on how much water and electricity got paid, certainly a hell of a lot more would be recovered. And I respect what was done in Harrismith. It is amazing. And it shows that we don't want to work against the municipality. We want to work with them. We realize maybe they don't have the manpower to do what we want to do, but assist us. Just collect. We cleaned out a whole lot of alien vegetation. All we want our city parks to do is collect it. We have sewers. They're tributaries to the Klein Yukska. That ends up in Norbierspoort Dam. Fix the sewers. Put manhole covers back. Sort out blockage. Water leaks are continuous. And there just seems to be a lack of urgency to attend to things. I don't know.
I think there is, and I think that one of the points that keeps coming through is that there will continue to be such a lack of urgency unless citizens take it upon themselves both to solve some problems on the ground, but also to use their votes and their ability to communicate with their municipal officers. Democracy is not just about voting. It's also speaking to your councillors. And that's one of the reasons the IRR is so keen to encourage people to speak to their councillors directly. If you want this rebate, speak to them directly about that. If you want something else, speak to them directly about that. And if you can do it one-on-one, that's great. If you need numbers, then you're even more likely to be taken seriously. We've come to 1 hour and 20 minutes and voted. I see that your hand up, but I want to call this to a close before 1 hour 30. So what I would really like is for everyone to finish off, please, with a 1 minute, if you have to push it to 2-minute statement. Let's wrap this up. It's been a very interesting conversation. I feel like I've learned some things. I've seen people in the course of this conversation suffer from service delivery and speak about the despondency, but also speak to what needs to be done to make a change. So voted, because you did have your hand up, let's start out with you. Please keep it brief and yeah, sign us off here.
I'm going to try my best, Gabriel. And thank you for the conversation once again. I think one of the biggest problems is that we have a wrong model of municipalities and local government. The Financial and Fiscal Commission already found in 2016 in their report on the division of revenue that the problem is the large and ever increasing in size municipalities. Service delivery is far from the people and getting further. And once there's an unviable municipality, then there's a demarcation and it becomes part of another municipality that's doing a little better. And that creates not a viable situation. And we're actually just creating a failure and have created failures. We need smaller, manageable municipal units. And that is a solution. We need to appoint municipal officials on merit. And not just on cadre deployment and whose friend and family and card-carrying member of which political party and so forth. And then the whole outstanding debt to Eskom needs to be addressed. It's not always municipalities owing Eskom money. Eskom also owes municipalities money. There's a billing structure problem. That should be addressed because it creates uncertainty. And that's why we're also not getting out of this dire situation. And that is 3 things that I think can solve the problem because it sounds as if there's no hope, but I think there is light. At the end of the tunnel, if we get rid of the ANC and we implement certain of these things, we can turn around the situation and we can once again be a proud nation with towns and cities that function. Thank you.
Thank you, Wouter. So Leers, off to you.
Thanks, Gabriel, and thanks for the chance to participate. One important point, let's not lose hope. Not all municipalities are rubbish. In fact, in broad terms, and I'm not trying to score points here, municipalities that have been governed by the DA for a prolonged period of time usually do quite well. Things aren't perfect, but the problems there are different from the problems that Petrus and some other folks are experiencing. So use this election, use this crucial opportunity. I know that in certain places we can't get the ANC out, but there are many municipalities in the country where if enough people come out and vote, you can tip the ANC below 50%, and at least then you've got a fighting chance to do something. Yes, it takes a long time. I know all about it. The city of Tshwane took years to get a massive budget deficit to a surplus, and then the ANC in Gauteng came, they intervened in Tshwane, and they wiped it all out. Now we've got 4 billion. Again, we've got to start all over. But don't lose hope. There are things you can do. The top 5 municipalities in this country have proved it. And just, Gabriel, one last point. So use the election, but one last point. There are things that national government are doing to municipalities that should also be spoken about. It's not just that municipalities are rubbish. It's that there is national legislation that makes it impossible for municipalities to get good value for ratepayers' money. The Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act, BEE, all of these things place a premium on purchases and really where an ordinary company can go for the cheapest price for the best value for money, municipalities are bound to preferential procurement BEE. There are other examples where national government reform is needed. Voters spoke about the Financial and Fiscal Commission. One recommendation that they've made is that more of the equitable share should go to local government. Now, from the perspective of municipalities that are well run, like Cape Town, like Mossel Bay, like Midvaar, like Stellenbosch, those municipalities can in fact do more with additional money from the fiscus, like generating their own electricity, like putting their own police officers, like Cape Town is doing now, on the streets. So when we're talking about issues like devolution, I think it's very important. That's hopefully a topic for a next debate, Gabriel. It's crucially important that we start looking at what share of the national tax, the equitable share municipalities are getting. Currently, it's less than 10%. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Elias. Otto, over to you.
Thanks, Gabriel, for the opportunity. We are pleased as the IFP that the IRI has introduced these kind of debates that will get the people of our country talking about issues that affect them. The challenge our country is facing is to have active citizenry who will hold their elected leaders and parties of their choice accountable. We, as the IFP, continue to commit ourselves to form part of these discussions if invited. We will be willing to serve the people of our country, given an opportunity. The IFP is a party that has got a track record of honesty and integrity, which the founder of the IFP has given to it, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, and he has given that as his legacy for which our country should remember him for. We need leaders in our country who are servants of the people. We need leaders who are willing to serve our people and who are willing to be answerable and accountable to our people. We thank the opportunity that is granted to us, and we appreciate being part of this debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and a lot of positive comments coming in for a lot of you. Thank you so much, and for you, Tatu. Okay, Wayne, I think we're gonna let's finish it off with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Gabriel. I firstly want to just say a big heads up and thank you also to Petrus and to Dave for the work that they're doing. I think they are certainly, to some extent, some of the unsung heroes within our country. Certainly in national parliament, politics sometimes has become racially, has a racial connotation and racial context to it. And we have to be moving away from that and from those who want to incite and hurl racial slurs and divide South Africa rather than unite. And what they are doing certainly is an indication of what it can be when different race groups come together to build South Africa. I think my concluding remark would be that the President of South Africa, Ramaphosa, spoke about we need structural reform. But we have to ask ourselves the question, what is structural reform? Structural reform, very simply, is removing those impediments to economic growth. It's where those impediments create policy and political uncertainty. You remove those particular impediments. There are many impediments, even at a local government level, which hinder economic growth. We have to ensure that it becomes our responsibility as law-abiding citizens, civil society, members of parliament, to ensure that we remove those particular impediments that hinder economic growth in South Africa. And on behalf of the president of the ACDP, we call on South Africans to unite, build, and grow. Together, we are able to turn this country in the right direction. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you.
There we go. And there we hit the hour mark. I'm going to say thank you very much to all of our guests, Wouter, Wayne, Saliers, Otto, and Petrus and Dave. Thank you to you guys too. It's been a pleasure. Thank you especially to our viewers who've been commenting heartily and very interestingly. Those comments have been popping up on the screen, and I think you've given something for for the guests to think about and take home themselves. We hope that you take this message home and that you share it around. It's very important for people to realize that it's not just the vote. It's also the day-to-day in which citizens can engage with politicians and demand something better. We encourage you to go to the IRR site. We'll have a link posted below here where you can sign on to our campaign to call for particular municipalities to give rebates to property owners who are currently having a tough time. But you'll also find other petitions there to do with gun rights, to do with expropriation without compensation, to do with race-based legislation that needs to be scrapped, and to do with breaking down the racial divides that currently hold this country apart, and that rhetorically, but not in our hearts, because we all really know what it takes to get together, and that's human cooperation. Thank you very much for your time, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you.